Is it a deal or is it not a deal?
Your job is to analyze what that house is in context of the whole suburb.
Simon Loo, founder of House Finder and property investor with a massive portfolio, unpacks a recent deal that you guys have sent in.
This property has potential because it has a studio at the back, improving the yield and making it more appealing. Is it a deal?
Opening up more about the process he walks through to find out if a property is actually worth buying and what you'd need to get it for it to be an under market deal.
You got to analyze comparables as though you're analyzing the house that you're buying as well. Land size is not everything. You have to look at the shape of the block. Even if you were to put in you're not going to get it.
What would you need to get that for it to be a deal?
A property like this, I would say it's a deal that...
If you're interested in understanding more of the detail in buying a property below market value, more specifically in the suburb of Dallas in Melbourne, you're going to enjoy this episode. My name's Todd Sloan. This is the Pizza and Property Podcast, and this episode is powered by Suburbs Finder, House Finder, and Full Circle Finance. More about our amazing show sponsors in the show notes below. But right now, let's jump into the episode with Simon Loo.
Simon Loo, it's time to talk deal or no deal.
Yes, it is.
You had to think about that for a sec?
I did.
Mate, I don't have a collection of gold cases or young ladies presenting, but what I do have is a question sent in by a young man.
I was expecting that. That was the reason for the pause. Yeah, and it never happened. So
I got you here under false pretenses. What can I say?
I know. And I fall for it every time.
Well, what we're doing is pulling apart a property that Nick has actually sent in. Now, this is a property in Dallas. I'll read the question out. I'm hearing so many people talking about Dallas in Melbourne. I was thinking this property has potential, we're about to go through the property, because it has a studio at the back, potentially being converted to a space that can be rented separately, improving the yield and making it more appealing. Is it a deal? This property is 1 Matoa Street in Dallas. I might not be saying that right, according to Simon's laughter. I'm definitely not. But 3-bed, 1 bath, 588 square meters with an asking price of 5 to 550. Well, this is a quoting price. This is going to auction. But Simon, why don't we start with initial thoughts on the property, then we'll move into the research and the result so we can get Nick an answer on this one. So what are your initial thoughts, mate?
Initial thoughts, what looks to be ex-housing built in the 70s, I would assume. A very, 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 very small house.
What are we looking at, like 90 square meters, 100 square meters? It doesn't actually say on the floor plan.
But yeah, basically there's no free space. It's just kitchen, living area, 3 bedrooms, a bathroom and a laundry. I mean, this is very typical of these kinds of older houses. First thing I always look at is Google Maps, because if there's anything that's not good around it, I almost immediately dismiss it. And immediately, if it's opposite Visi. And I don't know if it's Visi the recycling bit or if it's the Visi that makes paper or anything, but that probably is not.
It's industrial.
Industrial, yeah, definitely industrial. So street view, have a look at it. I think this was the house, was it? Hold on, give me 2 seconds. There we go. There it is.
Gotcha.
This beauty. I would write it off at this point.
Instantly.
Yeah, I would write it off. I mean, you're opposite this thing. Think of all the trucks. And this is a main road. Like, it's not a main road, but it's what I call a thoroughfare road. So there's all these cars that's just driving constantly in and out. The block is weird. Like this weird sort of rhombus kind of a shape to it.
That's a word that doesn't get used much.
It's a word that describes the shape of this particular shape. So I guess if you don't see the shape very often, you don't get to use it a lot. But here we are.
But it's like almost 600 square meters, but it would be very difficult to use.
It's useless, yeah. And actually, that's a good point. Land size is not everything, right? A lot of people make the mistake that having more land equals more money. You have to look at the shape of the block. You have to look at the character of the suburb. There's so many things to consider. And sometimes smaller blocks can actually be better than larger blocks if they're in the right position, if it's in line with the character of the suburb. Just a small tip there. Don't dismiss properties that are on small blocks because they actually still perform given the right fundamentals. I was going to say, looking at next door, you know, these guys have subdivided their property, but it appears to be a shape of a block that's a lot more sort of conducive for that to happen.
Got it. Okay.
I mean, if you were still super interested, young Nick, I don't know if you're young, but Nick.
Let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, young Nick, you know, if you were still interested and you were asking or considering this house, I would probably check with council and the controls and stuff just to see if you could put another house, because that would make a difference. But just looking at it straight up, I would immediately dismiss it just based on this alone. But let's assume I was okay with this and we can look a little bit further.
So I feel like we've kind of ruined the climax of the episode. However, if we can keep going through it all, because like you're saying, let's say that it actually was in a really good spot.
Yeah. Let's say that. We'll sort of analyze it as per how I would normally. So it's a 3-bed, 1 bath, 2 garage, which is in the shed. It's not actual garage. So someone built the shed. House, 588 square meters. Immediately, I look at comparable sales. So Dallas, house, 3, bathroom, 1, car space. I'm just going to say 1. Newest to oldest. So these are 3, 2, 4. You have to look at the condition of the house as well. This one seems very livable. Maybe not to everyone's tastes, but definitely nothing wrong with it. Pink walls, always a bonus. Similar block. You know, you got your rhombus shape, you got your shed. This is a decent comparable with an extra bathroom. The 4 car space is a bit cheeky. I believe you can only fit 2 cars in this shed. I think what they mean is you can also park 2 cars on the driveway.
You've always got to be pretty wary of that one.
Always, yeah. Yep. All the agents do it all the time. So this sold for $591, auction $500 to $550. Now I know for a fact that at the time of recording, Dallas and surrounds is a very sought after area at the moment by largely investors. And whenever you get areas like this, these auction price guides is basically you can just write off whatever they say. When they say 500 to 550, it's to lure a lot of interest so that they get a lot of hits and you get a lot of competition on auction day, and they're hoping that people get too emotional and they're just going to bid it super high. Even if you were to put in 550, whether it's before auction or at auction, you're not going to get it. You know, I can almost guarantee that they're probably looking for a little bit more, but who knows? I don't know.
We're looking at the comp sale already. It's not even like opinion then. It's more of a like this is what a comp is saying. And how much did that one sell for?
This one sold for $591.
$591, yeah.
15th of March, a few days before recording. This is another house, very small block, but the house looks a little bit nicer, a little bit more solid. You know, they've done a reno on it. That sold for $485. However, opposite train tracks. So you got to analyze comparables as though you're analyzing the house that you're buying as well, right? Because a lot of people would just look at, oh yeah, cool, here's another 3-bedroom house that sold for $485. Man, if I this one looks to be a big bargain. But the reason why is because it's close to the tracks and it's on a tiny block.
Yeah, was it like 290 square meters or something?
Yeah, 290 square meters. So yeah, very, very, very small block. Scroll down, have a look more. This is a pretty good comparable. This is probably built similar age, similar time, rhombus block. Most likely ex-housing as well. For some reason, all these houses are corner blocks. Only corner blocks are selling in Dallas. But 550, very similar, a little bit more land, but not insignificant. It's opposite a car park as well, actually, which is typically something I would never go for, because being opposite a car park is the same as being opposite industrial, right? You're going to get the same noise. You're going to get
headlights in the windows.
Headlights in the windows. But car parks in particular, you get undesirable nighttime activity.
Yeah,
you get a lot of people in car parks. They're typically up to no good. So that's something you might be dealing with consistently. And it's just it just puts a lot of people off, I think, at the end of the day.
I remember hanging out in car parks when I was 13. I wasn't exactly doing charity work.
Exactly. No one's in car parks for religious purposes. Okay, so cool. So around 550, honestly, like if I would say, I would put this value of this house at probably around the 550 mark.
Like it's true value, not
true
what
value.
you have. Yep, okay.
True value. Immediately for me to make it a deal, it'd have to be 500 as kind of like the top price.
Okay.
Yeah. Just knowing how the market works, you're not going to get a 500, especially if it's been marketed, if it's been put online, if the guide even would have been underquoted. Is starting at 500 probably a waste of time. Just to look at the condition as well. It's livable, but it needs a reno. Actually, I'm going to take the livable bit back.
I was going to say minimum standards. There might be a bit of money that needs to be thrown at this now.
The other thing about this house is it looks like it's been spec'd for wheelchair access. So this is one of the things that a lot of people don't tend to pick up. You can tell in the bathrooms. When the bathrooms look like the bathrooms from a hospital, it's usually designed for wheelchairs. So you'll notice there's no gap here, so wheelchairs can roll through.
The handrail on the bath.
The handrails. Yep. One of the things you need to check that may not be very apparent in property pictures is the height of everything. Because a lot of times if a property has wheelchair access, everything is built very low.
That's a fantastic point.
So that could affect rentals. It could affect demand. If you weren't anticipating a bathroom reno, that may mean that you need to put some extra money there to make it more normal, quote unquote. But at the same time, maybe you can attract a tenant that's in a wheelchair because they do have limited options. So something for you to think about yourself. But yeah, the house needs work. Now this here is the supposed granny flat potential, which is this thing here. Look, I'm not going to write it off as something that's unlivable, right? Because if it's safe, if it's in a condition that's livable, someone will rent it. But it's probably going to need work. I don't know anyone that would be readily living in a place that looks like this. I don't know if it has a bathroom. I don't even know if it's worth renovating. Like this is probably more akin to a shed rather than an actual livable structure. If you drop 20K, however it costs to renovate this, I'm not sure if it would be worth it. No. Especially given the value of the overall property, you're effectively spending 5% of the value of the whole property, 5 to 10% of the whole value of the property on renovating a structure that is maybe livable, but you're going to be attracting some also very potentially problem tenants.
And especially if you didn't do anything with it, like looking back at inside, if you go back one, like it kind of looks like where Mr. Squiggle would live after a nervous breakdown. Like it's just, it's very, for anyone listening right now on iTunes or Spotify.
Yeah, stuck in time.
Yeah.
It's like when it was built, nothing's changed. And also, I don't know if there's a bathroom. I don't know if it's connected to plumbing. That could be another issue, especially when it comes to council approvals and all that kind of stuff. Extra cost, extra pain.
So you'd write this off for Nick, and it's just like, it's a
Immediately.
possibility, but a very tiny one.
Like I said, if you buy for 500 and not even expect to need to rent this out, it can be a deal. But anything more than 500, I probably wouldn't go for it. Just quickly as well, if you want to have a look at how much it rents for. So houses, 3-bedroom houses. I mean, there's 11 rentals in Dallas at the moment, which is actually not bad. It's a very low number. But if I look at the vacancy rate, which I have here conveniently loaded already, it's rising. 1.6% at the moment. It's still low, but it is rising. You know, if you can see here at the start of 2024, it was probably 0.5%. So it's gone up actually quite a lot. And that says to me, and I know this area, is that there's just a lot of investors buying up properties on the ground. And I'm not sure if there's enough renters to match it.
Quite a sharp increase.
Yeah, but at the same time, 11 properties isn't a lot. So again, that kind of tells me that the rental demand for this area may not be that strong. And this could be an even bigger problem if your house looks like this. Something to be wary about, because when properties are harder to rent out, nicer houses drop their rents. So if you own a house that's a little bit older or less desirable, you're going to have to drop your rent even more to attract someone. So that's another problem.
And what's that bottom of the market for rent as far as dollars?
$340, that's a 1-bedroom unit. So this is a sort of renovated sort of one studio kind of, or maybe like an old house. It's an actual house actually.
And what about a 3-bedder?
Starts from $400 a week. This is nicer.
Yeah,
so
way nicer.
Way nicer. So if you, let's click on it. Outside, pretty similar. The one that we were looking at was brick. But for renters, whether a house is brick or fibro, it doesn't make that much difference. But internally, it's definitely nicer. Appears to also not be opposite a bunch of commercial buildings. So that's another good thing going for it. It's got a proper yard, I can see already. Yeah, it just looks like more like a normal house, you know. Business streetscape, that kind of a thing. So, if this house is up for rent for $400 a week, I would say the one that you're looking at, Mr. Nick, is probably going to be like
more like high, like 370.
Yeah, something like that. And honestly, like I don't even need to use the cash flow analysis, but 370 per week on a 500k purchase, if you could get it at that, is a very low yield.
Can you actually just pull it up just so we can see what would you actually be negative by? Because I'm with you. Like the numbers kind of already speak for themselves.
So 500,000, 20% deposit. I'm not even going to put in a renovation cost for the purpose of this exercise. You got your council rates here, $2,000 a year, building insurance, about $1,000. You got your landlord insurance here, which is about $500. So combined insurance, $1,500.
That's about right.
You got your repayments at 6% at the moment, which is roughly what it is currently. Your annual repayments, your monthly, your weekly. So if I type in here 370 as a lower rent, actually I reckon even 350 as a lower rent and 370 as a higher rent, you're negative about $200 a week, which is concerning.
And that's if you get it for 550. No, 500, sorry.
That's if you get it for 500.
Yeah.
Now if you get it for 550, which is what it's currently worth, in my opinion, you're negative $250 a week, right? So it's even a lot worse. $200 a week on a house, a very simple bread and butter house. If you're looking at Dallas and running the stats and fundamentals on Dallas at the moment, you're probably going to be waiting a while to see any significant growth. So how much can you handle $200 a week of consistent negative cash flow for how many years? And how much is that going to cost you? Because $200 a week is 10 grand a year. So if you think about it, like every single year, you're losing 10 grand on this house that you bought for 500. It's kind of like every year you passes, you're paying 510, 520, 530, 540. And that's assuming it's rented consistently. That's also assuming that you know, zero maintenance. So, which is not realistic. You're going to get vacancies and all that kind of stuff. I think based on that as well, it's a no deal. Absolutely.
And whilst you might get a few bit of negative gearing benefit, even if you're in a 30% tax bracket and then your 10 grand turns into 7 grand, it's still like
it's really
benefit's
nominal.
Not that, yeah,
really
exactly.
nominal. And also the other, for me anyway, Nick, I don't know what your property goals are. Generally speaking, most people want to build a large portfolio or at least a couple of properties. The banks are going to frown upon you very harshly when they look at a house that's costing you $200 a week, especially if you're, let's say, an average income earner bringing in 2 grand a week. You know, actually, no, 2 grand is above average now. It's like maybe more like a little bit less than that in terms of net income after tax.
Yep.
So you're not going to be able to borrow. You're not going to be able to buy your next one, or maybe you might be able to buy your next one, your third one, or fourth one, or fifth one, maybe not fifth one. You'll run out of borrowing power very quickly. That obviously limits how much money you make.
So what would you need to get that for it to be a deal? Would it need to have a 4 in front of it, basically? Knowing how much interest there is in Dallas at the moment, getting a 4 in front of it's probably not going to happen. But if you could.
Look, if anyone knows the Melbourne market right now, this is very typical of the cash flow for any property. And by the way, Dallas is in an area called Broadmeadows, and it's not the greatest of areas. You know, I think most people would agree. When even the entry level area, which is supposed to have high yield, has such low cash flow or low yields, in my opinion, short-term growth will be very limited. Usually after growth has happened, the yields become like this. And in Melbourne, except for the past 2 or 3 years, a lot of growth had happened since around 2010. You're buying this particular property at the end of a fairly long period of growth, followed by about 3 years up to date of no growth. The danger there is you're buying this house with low cash flow, and you might be waiting a slightly longer period before you see any meaningful growth, because usually after a period of 10 years, you get a longer period of stagnation. If you look at how property cycles have worked in the past several decades, and if you look at other cities as well. A property like this, I would say it's a deal at 500 because it is below market value, but it's probably more suited for an investor that doesn't care about cash flow, meaning they might have a bunch of other properties that are giving them positive cash flow elsewhere so that they can handle the negative 200.
But if Nick's at 0 and trying to get to 1, or at 1 trying to get to 2?
This is probably not a good option.
So what I'm hearing is it's not a deal. We got that established pretty quick, but for a few different reasons. One, because of its location, not so much that it's in Dallas, it's location within Dallas you're not happy about. Being across the road from something industrial, being on a bit of a thoroughfare, but like that main road, already instant turn off for you. Then we're talking about the fact that it's a rhombus block. So it might be a big block as far as square meterage, but you can't really do that much with it. As far as Nick talking about the potential to convert the studio, whilst there's potential there, it's almost no potential.
I want to throw in a caveat because I've always been a champion of every house has a value. Irrespective of where it is, what it is, whether it's opposite commercial, whether the block shape is rhombus or octagon or whatever, it doesn't matter. And I still want to apply that. For this particular house, it would need to be very cheap, like $450 or less, you know, maybe 400 even, for me to even take into account all the negatives combined. Because I will admit, one day, if and when Dallas grows, everything grows with it. The best house on the best street, the worst house on the worst street, the 5-bedroom house, the 2-bedroom house, the one with granny flat, the one without granny flat, everything grows, right? Nothing gets left behind. Your job is to analyze and determine what that house is in context of the whole suburb. Let's say this house with all its negatives is valued at 550 or 530. Make sure you're getting it well below that. And if you were looking at a house in Dallas that's 5 bedrooms on the nicest street and really beautiful, and let's say that house has a current value of 700, make sure you're paying 650 for it or less. So you make money everywhere, including this house, if you get the right price. But I just know just the way that they priced it, it's not going to happen. You know, they're not going to, it's never going to sell for 500, let alone 450.
Depending on when this episode comes out, it'll be interesting if it comes out before the auction or after it to actually see where it does go.
Yeah, who knows? I don't know. But this is also a very dangerous house for mum and dad investors. I see this happen all the time. They look at this, especially coming from maybe Sydney or other parts of Australia where 550 or $500,000 for a
3-bed, 1-bath on 600.
3-bed, 1-bath is like ridiculously cheap, right? And then they make the mistake, oh wow, it's also Melbourne. Melbourne is a bit of a buzzword because Melbourne and Sydney are considered like the global glamorous cities of Australia. And that's actually one of the reasons why I think a lot of people are actually buying Melbourne at the moment. Opportunistic, but also because maybe there's that romanticism of, I own houses in Melbourne. You know what I mean?
Because it's on the world stage.
Yeah, it's on the world stage. But if it's a bad deal, it's a bad deal. So I think a lot of mums and dads are going to look at this and go, oh wow, renovation. Yeah, you know, it might need $20,000, but it's only $500,000. I don't care. But if you're paying over market value, it's the same as any other property. You're not going to make money out of it quickly. And also you're probably going to just cause a lot of pain in your life. because you just did a renovation in Melbourne. You know, we talked about this as well just now, and I think there were some big lessons.
Absolutely, yeah. That was a great reno, but there was some very, very low points and some high points. But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, and like generally at this price point, it's not really worth sinking tons and tons of money into it. Like I said, if you're putting in even just $50,000 for a house like this, would basically bring it up to a decent state, not like the best state, but a decent state. That's 10% of the value that you're putting into for some paint, some carpet, a kitchen, a bathroom. More than likely, you're going to have to redo all of that if you held that property for 5 to 10 years, because when you stick tenants in, they're not going to look after any of it. You know, you're gonna have to redo most of it before you sell. At this level, like price point, you just got to be very careful about what you have to do to the property, the value. It's a lot more sensitive.
And then on top of all of that, looking at the cash flow side of things, being negative by around that $200 to $250 per week, whilst again, like you're saying, if someone's got several properties in their portfolio that are already kind of positive, then it's not as bad. But if you're going to start growing your portfolio to the tune of $10,000 plus a year negative, you're kind of growing it at a bit of a disadvantage from the very beginning.
Yeah, and you know, you limit yourself, you can't buy more properties. I mean, look, interest rates are falling at the time recording. So if I were to even type in 5% here on the cash flow, mine's really basic, but this is so effective for the purposes of just a quick analysis. At 5%, if interest rates drop 1%, you're still negative about $100 a week. So I don't think that makes any difference. You're still heavily negative, and also you would need the rent to increase to closer to $500 a week for it to happen. And you know, with vacancies rates creeping up, I just don't see that happening in the short term either.
Any other final words of wisdom or anything you'd like to leave with Nick or anyone else watching this, whether they're looking at Dallas or just wanting to really understand if it's a deal or not?
Look, in fairness, we probably could have ended this recording with the first two things that I talked about.
Would have been a pretty crap episode.
Yeah, exactly. But for the purpose of, you know, education, we went through a few other aspects as well. But really the first thing to look at is, where is it? Yeah, it's in Dallas, but look at this rubbish. Yeah, it's extremely undesirable. Make sure you price it in or just ignore it completely. And then secondly, just look at the comps. You know, we established that this house is probably worth
like around that 550 mark.
550 on a very good day, I reckon.
Yep.
On a good day. Immediately the agent has put down 500 to 550 as an auction guide. Anyone knows that basically the 500 bit is complete BS. So I would just move on. I wouldn't waste my time. There's another opportunity. And just one other thing to add as well. In these areas that's booming, that's the flavor of the month, that's being talked about on all the online forums and even podcasts and all this kind of stuff. You get a lot of hype in the area, and the hype translates into ridiculous prices. So I wouldn't be surprised if this house sold for 550 or more, a lot more. Whoever buys it, I think, will be making a pretty big mistake, you know, if it does sell for that kind of price range.
Unless they get it in the fours, then they've scored.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, but I can't see that happening. Anyway.
No, when it's online.
Mate, I enjoy these episodes, and I think we're going to be making more of these, because pulling a deal apart, whether you're actually looking at buying in Broadmeadows, Dallas, like anywhere around there in Melbourne, it's kind of like, this is good to have a little bit of an area insight too, but it's more so about understanding how someone actually looks at a property, how you actually start pulling it apart to go, is this worth further investigation, or is this something we're going to just chuck off to the side? And from a time perspective, from what you've really said there, you're chucking this one off to the side from the very beginning. So I think there's so much that we can all get from these. But mate, Simon Loo from House Finder, as always, thank you so much for jumping on the show.
No worries. Thanks for having me.